Hello world, this is Prince, and you're tuned in to Prince of the City. I am in the city of East Boston, sitting inside here at the Americano Espresso. Right here, sitting next to me, has a good friend of mine. He is actually a classmate at Suffolk Law School, but he's also running to be the next state representative here in East Boston for the 1st Suffolk District, right? His background is basically a public activist, community activist. He worked for Carlo Basile for a number of years, and now he's ready to take the horns, or he's really going to take his career to the next level. So, Adrian, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me, Prince.
And so, to start off this interview, go ahead and introduce yourself to the world and tell my audience out there why you're running for state representative.
Sure. Again, my name is Adrian Madaro, and it is an absolute privilege to be running for the 1st Suffolk District State Representative. I am a lifelong resident of the community, born and raised right here in East Boston, as is my mom. My dad is an immigrant from Italy, so I'm a first-generation American, which is not uncommon here in East Boston, which is the immigrant town of the city. And I went to Boston Latin School for high school, Tufts University for college. It was at Tufts that I began working for Representative Basile. I've been his chief of staff for 4 years in that time. Went back to Tufts, got a master's degree in public policy and urban planning. Started law school with Prince at Suffolk Knights.
Yeah.
And really just very involved in the community. I've served on a number of nonprofit boards, and I love East Boston. I'm running because it's a very special place. The best is yet to come for our community. And being able the past 4 years to work on policy and legislation that benefit and improve my community has been a very special treat. But most importantly, I just love helping people. And I feel so fortunate these past 4 years, having been able to work in a capacity where day in and day out, I wake up and my job is to help residents in the community, whether it's friends, neighbors, complete strangers. Being the one that's being a problem solver and helping folks address their everyday issues, concerns, and problems was a special feeling, and I want to continue to help folks in the community here in East Boston. That's why I'm running.
Thank you. So tell me, what makes you qualify for this position?
Certainly. Well, first of all, I think I have the right educational background. Going back to Tufts and getting a master's in public policy and urban planning was one of the most practical things I've done because what I was learning in the evenings, I was applying day in and day out in the office. Issues like transparency, inclusivity, smart development, and smart growth, all these types of issues. Secondly, I have the professional experience. I've been the right-hand man to the former state representative for 4 years. Having Rep Basile as a mentor, who's now Chief Secretary for Governor Baker, I was able to learn the inner workings of state government, the ins and outs of this job. I know I can step in there and hit the ground running on day one. There is no learning curve for me, and East Boston deserves a state representative who can be effective, who understands the budget process, who's gone through the budget process, who knows how to file on draft legislation and how to move that legislation through the legislative process. And I'll be able to leverage the relationships I've built with with other reps in the Boston delegation, with House leadership and Speaker Deleo, and now with Governor Baker through Chief Secretary Basile to really benefit our community.
Wow, amazing, very amazing stuff. So tell me, what has led you to run for state representative, especially right now? You're 26, kid. You're pretty young for running for state representative. So tell me why now?
It's just, you don't get many opportunities like this. They don't come around often.
Yeah.
Having served these past 4 years as Rep Basile's chief of staff, having just come off the tail end of his reelection, having gone through that whole process and seeing the change in the community in the time I've worked in politics, the time is now, because we're at a critical juncture here in East Boston where there are a lot of things that need to happen. We're a community that's in flux. It's rapidly changing by the day with development and influx of new peoples, whether it's immigrants or whether it's young professionals moving in. And there's a lot of work to do. And, I really want to be the first person that East Boston residents think of calling when they need help, and I want to be East Boston's advocate on Beacon Hill.
All right. Well, thank you for that. Now, let's talk about some issues. So what are your 3 biggest issues that you're advocating for as the next state representative for East Boston, and that the people of East Boston should remember?
Sure, certainly. I have a number of priorities and a number of things that I'd like to see for our community, but 3 of the top ones would be economic opportunities for everyone in our community. I see public transportation and economic opportunity tied hand in hand. Clearly, the past few days we've seen the MBTA system crumble and come to a screeching halt, and folks in East Boston, which is the only geographically isolated neighborhood of the city,
that is true,
have been stuck here, not able to get to their work, to their jobs in town. Many of our folks, our residents here, work in the service industry. And these are folks who aren't going to get paid if they don't go to work and might even lose their job. So the fact that our transportation system isn't allowing folks to put food on the table for their families is a shame to me. So first of all, we need to invest in transportation. We need a red-blue connector, and we need to make sure the blue line stops at the silver line at Airport Station, because then we increase economic opportunity for residents of East Boston by opening up jobs or avenues, pathways to careers in the innovation sectors of Cambridge and Boston and the Seaport in South Boston. So number one is good economic opportunity. I see that not only through those pathways outside of East Boston, but also through waterfront development. Whatever happens at Suffolk Downs, I know we need to make sure that these jobs are prioritized for East Boston residents. I think on that same vein of thought, bringing back vocational programs to our high school. We need to make sure that kids have multiple opportunities to succeed and be successful and have pathways to careers. And that starts with realizing that not every kid is going to go to college. And the fact that we don't have a vocational track here in this community, we're doing a disservice to youth who should be following those tracks, because the world is always going to need electricians, plumbers, carpenters, folks who are working at the airport or in the healthcare facilities, and we need to leverage the relationships with Massport, the airport, and with our local neighborhood health center to make sure that they're helping out.
Right.
Another top priority is a strong educational foundation for all our neighborhood's youth. Right now we have one of the fastest growing youth populations in the entire city, yet not every kid has a pre-kindergarten seat. That to me means we're doing a disservice to our children. When you have this conversation about extended school day, universal pre-K, vocational programs in our schools, full-time school nurses, guidance counselors, substance abuse counselors, you can't have this conversation without first addressing local aid at the state level. And since 2008, we've lost $150 million in local aid to the city of Boston. Local aid goes to public safety, and a majority of it goes to public education. So this conversation can't be had about improving our public education system without addressing that local aid. I want to step in as the next state rep of East Boston and advocate to not only restore that $150 million in local aid, but increase it. So we're giving our public schools the resources that they need. And another big priority is making sure we have the safest streets possible. Because in order to have a healthy and vibrant community, you need good schools, good jobs, and safe streets. When I was growing up in East Boston, crime was much higher. Now we're the second or third safest neighborhood in the city, behind communities like West Roxbury, which are far more suburban than East Boston. However, we're not all the way there yet. We have a community that's growing by the day.
Right.
With all the development that's going on, the population is swelling. And we need to make sure that our public safety departments, fire and police, are growing along with them. We also need to make sure that the growth is reflective of the diversity of the population. An example of that is we have a burgeoning Arab community here in East Boston. We need police officers who speak Arabic and who understand the religion, the values, the cultures, and the customs. Development is another one that we need to harness, but that's maybe you'll ask about that. That's
maybe
a whole other conversation.
Okay, well, we're short on time, so I'm going to talk about at least 3 issues that I have here. One is the snow. As you know, this is probably the snowiest season here in Boston, and people are complaining.
Crazy.
Yeah, people are complaining as far as the low efficiency of snow removal. Some, I was actually driving a taxi cab, and they're just complaining how they can't even move snow to park at the curb. So tell me, what is your plans to have an efficient snow removal here in East Boston? You do become East Boston.
It's clearly it's been difficult.
Yeah.
Not only for folks trying to get to work, to school, to the hospital, but it's also been difficult in the campaign trail because we've been navigating 10-foot snowbanks trying to door knock. Needless to say, one thing we can start with is improving our transportation infrastructure.
Okay.
Right? We have trains that are 35 years old that can't operate in New England winters. This is New England. We should expect a lot of snow and cold weather. That means that our trains need to be modernized.
Yeah.
And also the fact that we have switches from the 1930s. Now, in this type of climate, we need switches that are heated so they can operate in the cold. Right now, we don't have that.
Right.
But on a more localized level, the fact that we have to borrow snow melting machines from New York, that to me is silly. Again, This is New England. We should have snow melting machines right here, ready to deploy. If you just look outside the cafe that we're at right now, there's huge mounds of snow piles.
There is.
We need to make sure we're holding, these men and women have been working around the clock throughout the city and the state trying to remove these snow piles. But particularly in a densely populated community like East Boston, these snow piles are affecting local businesses who are losing patrons because there's no place to park. It's affecting people's lives. It's affecting the entire local community. And so we need to make sure that the snow removal is functioning at a high level. We're going to get these snow piles out from small businesses, from street corners, so buses can navigate and so that it's not dangerous for people. It's a public safety issue.
Yeah.
And we got to make sure that we're proactive rather than reactive on these things. And if it means investing more, then that's what we have to do.
Okay, great. Now let's talk about as you say before, the burgeoning diversity here in East Boston. One of the things I noticed here since I've been living here is the population. We have like a huge majority of the Latino community, and I feel they're kind of a little bit underrepresented. And there's actually been a great, rift and divide between them and as well as the city hall. So I would like to know, what would you do to close that gap, and what would you do for the Latino community here in East Boston?
Integration is critical for a community because we are one East Boston, and we need to make sure we need to do everything in our power, not only as elected officials or folks who work in government, but also as residents, to make sure that we are one East Boston and that there aren't these divisions.
Right.
It starts with simple things like making sure everything's available in multiple languages. It also starts with giving resources, making resources accessible here for folks. Being the only geographically isolated community, folks are forced to pay either by train or by car through the tunnel fee to go access their elected representation, their elected officials. I want to be here in East Boston. I'll host district hours often, make sure I have on my staff folks who are bilingual. That way you increase pathways of communication to folks right here, and they don't have to leave their community to access their representatives. I'm the president of the Harborside Community Council, which is a nonprofit organization that's the largest provider of adult education and ESL classes in the city, in East Boston. These are critical resources that recent immigrants utilize in order to get an economic foothold in the country. It's very difficult to be a small business owner or an entrepreneur when you don't have basic adult ed and basic English skills. Our wait list for ESL classes are over 400 persons long. The demand is there, but we need to meet that demand with more resources at the state level.
Okay.
Needless to say, as a first-generation American, these are issues I know very well.
Good.
And it would be a top priority to make sure we're taking care of that population.
Awesome. And then last but not least, it's actually a personal issue of mine, which is littering as well as the continual visibility of trash on the streets. Now, I've been living here in East Boston for at least 2 to 3 years now. And every time I walk, I always see trash on the streets. And it's still a problem today. And nothing has been done about it. I'd like to know from you, since you're running for state representative, what is your plan of action to clean the streets of East Boston and to maybe condone littering on the streets? Should we have more trash cans, or what is it?
This has been an issue that has plagued East Boston forever. We've tried more trash barrels, and then folks put their household waste in the public trash barrels. I really think it's a matter of education and enforcement. So first of all, there should be a campaign to educate in multiple languages what the rules and regulations are for not only putting out the trash, but how to handle being a resident in this community, sweeping in front of your house or business, that type of thing. After the period of the educational campaign, then there needs to be enforcement. Right now, I believe we have one code enforcement officer for the entire community. That's a lot to cover for one guy. We need more code enforcement officers, and we need to make sure we're hitting them where it hurts, which is in the pocket. And if folks aren't abiding by the rules and regulations, when they feel in the pocket, they're going to shape up. The city of Chelsea has done something very interesting where they have City of Chelsea trash bags with the city seal on them. They're multiple ply bags, odorless, and your trash won't be picked up unless it's in a City of Chelsea trash bag. Here in East Boston, we have folks putting their trash out in bags from CVS, Walgreens, Shaw's, those little thin plastic bags that get torn open by animals or by trash pickers. If we implemented something like that, that could be very helpful for deterring the litter. And the last part of that is also investing in public art, because I think if you invest in public art and put it in places like our public parks, I believe that in and of itself is a deterrent. When you create a beautiful space, people are going to be less likely to litter. So needless to say, enforcement, education and enforcement, I think are the two main things, and hopefully we'd be able to see some improvement.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. I'll hold you to it, man.
Please do. Hold my feet to the fire.
All right. Lastly, guys, I got 2 questions from the Twitterverse. This is part of my show where people from the Twitterverse ask you a question. I have 2. One is from actually a friend of mine, Kevin Frank, who I worked on the Elizabeth Warren campaign. So, hey, Kevin, how you doing?
He's a great guy.
Yes. So he asked you this: how can you make sure that development along the waterfront benefits the people who already lives in East Boston?
Certainly. First of all, it's going to create jobs. We have to make sure the construction jobs are prioritized for East Boston residents, and we have to make sure the permanent jobs, probably in the service industry, hotels, bars, restaurants, are for East Boston residents. Second of all, it's going to benefit us by being an economic engine for our local economy.
Right.
We're going to bring people. We have the best waterfront in the city. I envision once our transportation, once our ferry system is up online, you have folks from Southie, North End, Charlestown, all over the city taking ferries to East Boston to enjoy our restaurants, to enjoy our bars, and looking at the best view of the skyline you could possibly have. They're going to frequent our small businesses. They're going to spend money here, and it's going to be helpful for East Boston.
Right. Okay, great. And then lastly is from John at John FPC. He asked you this question. What is your plan to help the middle class stay in Eastie with the rapidly rising housing costs?
Sure. That's a great question, and I'm glad you asked that, because that is also another priority to kind of harness the development. The East Boston of my childhood is not the East Boston of today.
Yeah.
East Boston of my childhood, it was a place where people were leaving in droves. There was a lot of disinvestment, a lot of vacant lots. Crime was much higher. Today, it's one of the hottest real estate markets in the country. It's written about in national real estate magazines. People are flooding East Boston, not only to move here, but to develop here. Every developable lot is being developed upon. That investment is good for the community, but we need to make sure that development isn't it's not at all costs. It's got to be balanced, responsible, smart growth.
Right.
That means that we need to balance the luxury waterfront on the development with affordable housing, with workforce housing, with family housing, so that we can keep folks from all walks of life here, whether it's a senior that's born and raised here and raised their family and needs affordable housing, whether it's a recent immigrant that moved here to be with their social support system and network. East Boston has to remain a place where everyone can thrive and raise a family. That's a healthy and vibrant community.
Okay, great. Well, before we end this interview, take this time at least, in one sentence, why my audience should vote for you.
I'm the right man for the job. I know the issues. I have a great pulse in the community. I have the experience, the education, and I have the passion to help better East Boston and to help its residents. I want to be your advocate on Beacon Hill. And so that's why I'm running. And I humbly ask for your vote on March 3rd. And thank you for the opportunity, Prince. This has been fun.
Oh, hey, it's been great catching up with you, man.
Thank you.
You're doing a great job here.
Thank you.
And so before we leave, where can my audience follow you and your issues? And where do they need to vote? Or actually, when do they need to vote?
March 3rd is the vote.
Yeah.
Is the day of election. 12 short days away, but who's counting? You can follow me on my Facebook page, Adrian Madaro. I also have a Twitter, at Adrian Madaro. And I also have a website, www.adrianmadaro.com, which is constantly updated with information, press releases, and the like. Thank you again for the opportunity.
No, anytime, man.
Hold down Suffolk Law for me.
Will do. Well, this has been Prince. This has been Adrian Madaro here in East Boston. This is Prince in the City. Until next time, guys, be good to yourself and stay classy.
Thank you.
See ya.